Welcome to Your Life Reset, a Virta Health podcast series. I'm your host, Teresa Link, and in this series, we'll hear from people on their Virta journey, the wins, failures, moments of adversity, and moments of joy they're experiencing along the way. So sit back, relax, and listen as we unwrap the truly human experience of Virta. Hey there, listeners. I'm Teresa Link, and this is Your Life Reset. Meet today's guest, Linda Cicero, a certified health coach with a passion for nutrition and well-being. Like many people, she once viewed health as all about weight and fad diets, and she was chasing an image rather than true wellness. But two key experiences changed everything: ballroom dance, which helped her reconnect with her body, and a lecture by Dr. Mark Hyman, which shifted her understanding of food and nutrition. Now, she's all about helping others feel their best, with a special focus on hormonal health and managing chronic stress. And I must say, she teaches a mean hip hop class. Well, Linda, it's great to see you. Welcome to the show.
Thank you so much, Teresa. I'm so happy to be here. Thank you so much for having me. I'm so glad we were able to finally make this happen.
Yeah. And you said April is Stress Awareness Month, or tell me more about that.
Yeah, it's Stress Awareness Month, and it's just the perfect time to be having this conversation about chronic
Yeah.
stress and how we can really help, ourselves and others manage the very real reality that stress is going to happen. So, how can we do our best with it?
Yes, yes. Well, this is going to be a really great conversation, I think, and something that a lot of people can probably every single person can relate to. So excited to dive into this topic. But before we do, Linda, let's hear a little bit about you. So tell us about yourself and what got you into this work.
Yeah. So I am a health coach here at Virta, but before coming to Virta, I lived a marketing and promotions career for almost 13 years. And then from there, I actually took kind of a big turn and I actually followed a dream of mine to open a dance studio of my own. So dance was something that kind of came into my life in my 20s and really just changed my life. So I wanted to pay that forward and started a studio of my own, and then, had that for almost 8 years. We wound up selling it, and, then I moved into health coaching from there.
And so there's a lot of, dots that you can connect there, right? Tell me a little bit about how one thing sort of led to the next.
Yeah, good question. Kinda health and wellness has been that underlying current throughout my life that it's been something that I've always been interested in, right? But just, kind of it took a little bit of time for me to kind of bridge it into a career. And I would say for the first part of life, that was very much kind of through the lens of fad dieting because that just kind of was the conversation from a health perspective for many years. I, like many women, it you kind of like fell into that just, what's the next diet to go on and just kind of go from there, right? And then over time, that evolved for me. So it evolved from a very kind of outward weight focus, which is very important, but just kind of like having that be the predominant. So shifting from that to a more kind of a holistic health, lens. And there were kind of two things that really happened in my life that really played a big role in that. And the first was dance. So dance was something that, brought me back into my body and I really didn't recognize it at the time that I needed it, but now hindsight 2020, it really was that thing that just brought so much confidence and joy and brought me back into myself, and I wanted to become healthier to dance more. It was that thing that kinda motivated me, and it also kinda helped me realize, like, before we step into a house with 4 walls, the first place that we live is our body, right? So it's we need to take care of that house first. So dance was kind of that first big moment for me, and then
Hang on, let's go back to dance for a
yeah.
second. So, when did you start did you just all were you just the kid that was just always dancing and then you were like, "Hey, I wanna make this a little bit more formal part of my life." How did you kinda get into that?
Yeah, good question. So I always loved to dance. Music was always playing in my house. Both my parents are actually they both have really good rhythm. It's actually one of my favorite things to do is actually watch my parents dance when like at a wedding. It brings me so much joy.
Now, what
But
music was always what music was always playing?
Oh, it depended. So, my dad is a huge Frank Sinatra fan, so there was a lot of Sinatra and just, like, the standards, Tony Bennett, Diana Krall, that was a big one, and
Yeah.
then my mom is Puerto Rican, so there was a lot of Latin, so a lot of Julio Iglesias played, so
Oh,
we had a nice
nice.
we had a nice mix, we had a nice mix. We actually could always tell, like, when we were growing up, my father would always play music when he got home, so it was kinda like a precursor to let us know, okay, did dad have a good day or a bad day?
Yeah, yeah.
Um
I grew up dancing as well, but I didn't have the same type of music. I had The Doors and,
Ooh,
Mamas and the Papas, and,
yeah.
yeah, what else did we a lot of Michael Bolton, so somehow somehow that turned into me getting into ballet. No idea, but, there's no 2 way no 2 same paths to get there. Alright, so tell me more about this.
So yeah, I always loved music and I loved moving to music, but growing up I actually just played sports. But what I did do growing up is I used to watch those ballroom specials with my mom, like those PBS specials, and
Mhm.
I just was in awe of those women with the dresses and the makeup and all like the expression that they had, and I was just like, wow, I just loved watching them. So in my mid-20s, I was living in Norwalk, Connecticut, and I would drive by this Fred Astaire dance studio all the time. And, it's just one of those things where, when you see something and there's that little it's that voice, it's that little voice saying like, "You should go in there. You should go in there. You should
Yeah.
go in there." And then finally, one Thanksgiving break, I finally just said, "I'm just gonna go in." And I went in and I just asked them, "All right, well, can you guys tell me about what you do?" And I had my first lesson on the spot, and I left just my soul it just filled my soul, and I just knew, like, it was exactly where I needed to be at that moment in my life.
What was your first lesson? What style of dance?
Oh, they do all sorts. So you kinda get a taste of everything. So I did a little swing, I did a little foxtrot, I did a little
Uh-huh.
salsa, and I think I did a little waltz. The
Okay.
4 kinda core, yeah.
Okay.
Yep. It was
Alright.
awesome.
So what was your favorite? If you kinda had to think back, if they put on the music, what would you say? "Oh, yeah, I can't wait. This one's my favorite."
I do love foxtrot. I think it is that connection to childhood with, like, my dad playing Frank Sinatra all the time with, like, the standards, that kinda big band music. Yeah, I would have to say I think it's foxtrot, although I really don't foxtrot often anymore at all, if ever, but yeah, I would say that's one of my favorites.
Hard to foxtrot solo, right?
Yeah, it is.
Yeah.
I mean, you could do it. You could do it.
Yeah, yeah, you could
It's
just have a pretend you could have a pretend,
exactly, little
yeah.
dance
Yeah,
party, little
well,
foxtrot party.
foxtrot party, I love it, I love it. So dance became a very big part of your life, you started your own studio, um, you had a marketing career, right? All of this stuff seems to be, like, things that can go together, so tell me about how you started your own studio and what you kind of what how that helped really impact your health as well.
Yeah. Um, well, I think the how was really just, I was working in marketing and, I loved marketing, I loved being creative, but ultimately, for me, there was something I didn't wanna be in that same desk all the time. It was just something that I just didn't want that point in my life. So, and dance, I got really close to the owners of my studio, and again, it filled me up, and it brought me so much confidence. It helped me change my relationship with my body, and I saw that with others too, right? I mean, it's something that it's undeniable. It just brings you so much. Yeah, there's just so much to say about dance. But, and I just wanted to pay it forward. So I just I worked up enough savings at the time, what I thought was enough savings, working full time, and just said, I wanna start a studio and got part-time job. I started teaching more. I also started teaching like so fitness classes as well. I became a Zumba instructor and I started working part-time for Fred Astaire at the dance studio where I dance. So I just started. I just took the leap and not really knowing, like, how it was all gonna work out, but I knew, you just know. When you know, you know, and I just started kinda walking the path, and about a year the first year was really hard, and, then I eventually met a woman who became my dance partner, and, we moved into teaching kids, and, it just kind of organically grew from there. I originally kind of set out to be an adult focused business, and then I met my partner, and she was a mom in a local town, and we started to do things together, and people were like, "What are you guys doing? You should do teach kids. Please teach kids." And then
Yeah.
eventually we started teaching kids, and it was a beautiful, again, you just never know the direction it's gonna go, right? Like, so kinda like similar to you, you're listening to, The Doors, and then you're gonna take ballet. You just never know how it's
Yeah.
all
I
gonna
don't know
kinda
how they're
manifest, right?
connected.
You just don't know. Um, but, and we just it was a lot of organic growth and a lot of just, allowing it to manifest naturally, and, we focused on hip hop and breakdancing, 2 formats that were not really all that offered within the area, especially for kids, and it was really cool to, again, to see how dance, allows for expression, especially with kids. It's different than sports, and sports are great, but there is this different thing that dance offers because there's the music and there's just, like, this freedom that comes with it. So, um, and you can see, and obviously then from just a health benefit, right? I mean, movement is magic. I always say
Yeah.
movement is magic. Where however you can get it, wherever you can get it, that it's so beneficial, just not only physically, but mentally and emotionally. There's just so much benefit to physical movement. So, having the opportunity to pay that forward with the studio, with kids, and also adults was just, kind of the the best of all the worlds put together.
And the peak of your career, really, teaching a group of uncoordinated women, um, in their 30s
So
and
funny.
40s,
Not
at a Virta offsite. I think we had so much fun, though. It was so fun. Everybody just kind of they went for it. Everybody just
Yeah,
went
they
for
did.
it.
It was awesome. It was
Yeah.
awesome. It was a peak. I can't tell you actually, I laughed, and I still watch that video because it was so awesome to share that piece with now my new
Yeah.
coworkers in this new chapter. It was so special.
Yeah.
And PS, everyone, Teresa Links got moves.
This
So
is not
you
about me.
you you heard it here first, but it was so, yeah, I mean, that was just, I very much hope that there's opportunity to do that
Oh, I
again
think
in the
it'll be
future.
back with high demand for sure. All right. So we've really been talking a lot about dance and how important movement is. You said movement is magic. How important and what a critical role that played in your own health journey. You mentioned there was another critical kind of thing that happened where you learned more about food and nutrition. So tell us about that.
Mhm. Yeah. 2016, I was actually at a Zumba convention, so there goes that dance again. And Dr. Mark Hyman, believe it or not, had partnered with Zumba
Really?
to develop a program for instructors.
Okay.
So it was called, I think it was called Plated. Don't quote me on that, but I think it was called Plated. But as an instructor, you get asked often, what do you eat? How do you take care of yourself? So it was, kind of an effort to help arm instructors with good information to help, to share in those times when we're asked, how do you take care of yourself? But I think it was like an hour and a half. And he had just released his book, Eat Fat, Get Thin. And that book was all about, dispelling the myths around the fat-free revolution, which I rode super hard. I mean, I was on that train big time. And just, he shared, the now very common research done with rats and sugar and the effect on the brain and the same, dopamine centers that it hits. And I just remember being my mouth just kept going, right? And just kind of hearing these, like, truth bombs over and over again, and I left that room on a completely different, kind of brain w wave than I entered in. I bought his book immediately, read it, and, started modifying the way I ate, and then from there, got his food fix, other books, and just started just acquiring more and more information from there because the more I learned, the more I just started to feel so much better, not only about I just started to feel better, right? Because the knowledge rea it sounds so cliche, but there is a power in knowing, and we don't know a lot because, we don't get I don't know about you, but, like, my health class didn't cover a lot in school, right? So we are
No.
a little bit on it, right?
Stop
So
smoking, and that was basically And do a
Right.
little bit of walking 3 times a week, as
Yeah.
that's kind of it.
Exactly. That's kind of it. So we don't know what we don't know. And I think, once, at least for me, once I started to know and I started to feel the effects of then putting that knowledge into action, I just wanted more of it. And then I developed a passion for sharing it. Because once you kind of feel like what works, you just it's it I think it's innate in human. Like you just want to share it, right?
Yeah.
Like, oh my God, you gotta try this. This is amazing. And that eventually led me into getting my coaching certifications through, NASM and then IIN. And now I'm here at Virta.
And here you are. Everybody has that path of
Yep.
getting, getting here in one way or the other, and most people have that aha moment, and it's really cool to hear about your story, how all of these things really connect and, ultimately led you to where you are, um, and you're able to utilize all those skills, right, in your coaching and probably just in your everyday life.
Uh-huh.
So to kind of circle things back, really the topic of today's episode is um, chronic stress and really how can we help mitigate that? What can we do? And you've mentioned a lot of things. Movement is magic. You've mentioned how much you feel better after you've implemented a lot of those learnings that you got when you were listening to Dr. Mark Hyman. Um, Exercise, starting at teaching, all of these things really helping you. So, um, I think it's really important for us to recognize the role that chronic stress can really play
Uh-huh.
on our lives. And, thankfully you're here to really help us learn more about that today. So, in your experience, can you tell us about how chronic stress relates to burnout, which is I think it's like the most Googled term in 2024 is burnout. Everybody's feeling burned out. So what's the relationship
Mm.
between chronic stress and burnout?
Yeah, absolutely. So great question. And you're right. There is a almost like a straight line from chronic stress to this thing called burnout, right? So a couple things, right? So first and foremost, I think burnout is it's important to actually know what burnout actually is. Okay? So burnout is a kind of a term that's been used to address what is called adrenal fatigue. Okay? So your body has a stress response and, it has a various amount of, gland I don't wanna get too sciencey, but essentially your adrenal glands, which are right above your kidneys, they are kinda like the epicenter of, helping your body manage stress because from your adrenals is what really they release cortisol, okay? So and
Mhm.
cortisol is one of our main stress hormones, right?
Yeah.
So, again, not to get too sciencey, but it goes, our stress response, it's like from nervous system and then, to your brain, hypothalamus, pituitary gland, adrenals. Okay, so like that, that's called the HPA axis.
Okay.
Okay, so as you're going through your day, right, there are various amounts of stressors that we have, right? So every time that we are experiencing stress, whether it is actual or the thought, that's a really important point. Your body does not distinguish between an actual and the thought of something stressful. Either way, the stress response is happening. So with that in mind, it's kind of easy to kind of understand and really see how fast stress can start to build, right? So let's just kind of go through an average day, right? So let's just say you are a busy mom and you're working, okay? You wake up, maybe you get a message, you check your phone first, and maybe there's an email waiting for you. Like the deadline that you thought was in 2 days is now today. Oh, great. You jump out of bed and there's an immediate stress response, right? You're going, your adrenaline's up, you're energized, okay? Quote unquote energized. So each time that you're feeling that stress, again, that stress response is happening. So cortisol is being released and it's prepping and glucose is also being released. That's an important point to help energize the stressor. Okay, so you start to get ready, and then, lo and behold, your kid actually misses the bus that day because that's what happens. And then you have to take them to school, right? Or she, you take them to school. That makes you late. You get stuck in traffic. You enter work. You haven't eaten breakfast because that's the kind of morning you're having. You grab a bagel because that's what's available. Pour another cup of coffee. You work through lunch. You end the day, you get the project out, then you get into your car, you go to pick up your kid from practice, and then, you pick up food on the way, and all throughout, right? You're burning through that cortisol response. That stress response is happening again and again because now you feel that pressure to get that project done. Okay, so you eat, maybe you pour yourself a glass of wine at home, and then finally you sit down on the couch and everything starts to come down, right? That
Mhm.
cortisol starts to come down, your glucose starts to come down, but now your body's been riding that kind of like nice little high all day, and then it starts to hit, "Oh, wait, where's my next hit? Thank you so much."
It's like a
And that's when we start
crash.
to
Yeah.
Exactly, and we hear this all the time from members, "I get cravings at night." And then when we start to kind of understand what their days are looking like, oftentimes, especially well, actually, it's really both. But, it's that down it's your body's coming down from that stress throughout the day, and now it's craving the next glucose hit, and that's gonna be a craving that it's looking for something, and usually it's that salty sweet thing, right? So whether it's crunchy or sweet.
Wow.
And usually you're gonna have that little snack, and then you go to bed 6 hours later if or 8 if you're really lucky. You get up and do it again. And, maybe that's not your exact day, right? But you can kinda see with just that example how easily it starts to build and build and build and build, right? And the more times we are eliciting that stress response, your adrenals eventually they will get tired. And then in a preparation to ultimately, help, balance things out, they slow down.
Mm,
So that co
okay.
they slow down with, like, the amount of cortisol that they're able to produce. However, your body still needs that cortisol in order to respond to the stress. So there's another hormone called pregnenolone. Again, I don't want to get too sciencey, but I think it's important to really kind of understand to get to your, to kind of understand how chronic stress can get to burnout. So what starts to happen is, in that space of fatigue, when you are basically lower cortisol response from adrenals, now they're fatigued. You're in adrenal fatigue at that point. And now to kind of make up for it, what starts to happen is something called the pregnenolone steal. Pregnenolone is a precursor hormone. From it, we get either progesterone or it also makes DHEA, which is a really important hormone for both men and women because from it comes testosterone and estrogen. Okay, so now we're getting into like sex hormones, right? But if we're gonna steal the pregnenolone, which we need to make those sex hormones to go make cortisol, what starts to happen? Now we have imbalance. We have imbalance not only from an adrenal standpoint, but now it can start to very easily get into our sex hormones. So that's when we start to see things for women like PCOS, your PMS symptoms might start to get really, really gnarly. And other, and for men too, men have stress, right? So then from men, if we reduce testosterone levels, low libido, low energy, fatigue, belly fat for both men and women. So you can kind of see how the burnout over time or the chronic stress over time can lead into the burnout or the fatigue, adrenal fatigue that then can downstream affect into other hormonal imbalances.
Yes. It is just so familiar, and it seems just universal for many of
Yep.
us. Our culture is just go, go, go. Be
Mhm.
all of the things, especially a lot of women. Not to discount the men out there, but a lot of women feel that pressure to do it all, especially moms. And that can be really tough. I was hearing you describe the day, and I was like, I can feel my stress response going up right now. It's so familiar. And then you sit down on the couch and you're like, I just need to go to bed. I I'm so yeah, I'm just so just so over the day already. It's just so familiar. So one of the things I look forward to us talking about here next, there's a ton of different aspects of stress, probably more than we could do a whole nother episode on that. And we definitely can. All the different types of ways that the stress can impact your body, physically and emotionally. You specifically went into a lot of cortisol and the adrenals and that piece of it. Um, but what I wanna kinda shift now, we know that stress equals bad for us, basically. I think we can say, but we're all stressed out, all of us, and if not all the time, at least some of the time. So, let's talk about some potential things we can do about it. Um, one of the things I've heard you talk about is the love approach. Tell us about that. What does it stand for? And yeah, describe that just a little bit.
Yeah, well, who doesn't love an acronym, right? I
Right.
mean, we all love a little acronym. But yeah, so love stands for listen, offer, value, and express. And I'll kind of go into a little bit more about what that all means. But, you know, at the end of the day, the more we can kind of love up on ourselves, right? And kind of build that balance for ourselves, the better off we can be. So, L, listen in, right? So the more we're able to, kind of tune into what our body is telling us and find the space and just make the space for that. And it doesn't have to be hours, right? We're talking a little bit of time in the morning, a little bit of time in the evening, maybe a check in the afternoon. You know, just we are so often in that go-go, like we were just saying, Teresa, you're going, you're going, you're going. So we are working a lot in our subconscious, right? The autopilot of life. But if we can very, purposely just slow down at a few key moments throughout the day and consciously connect and kind of tune into what our body is telling us, that can really serve us in a big way over time. So, speaking specifically for women, I would say, if you are not currently tracking, and again, going back to the hormonal piece, if you are not currently tracking your cycle, I would highly, highly recommend taking some effort to do that, right? There are a ton of apps out there. So you have like the Flow app. There's also an app called Liven. Why is this important? Well, number one, you can start to, see, are you having a regular cycle, which is really important to understand. But then also, what starts to happen within our cycle is we are going through key hormonal shifts throughout it, right? So, we all follow a circadian rhythm, but because we are women, we have this second rhythm. It's an infradian rhythm that's our menstrual cycle. So that just makes us different, and that's okay. So we have to really kind of get more curious a little bit about that if you're not already, just to understand, right? This is not about getting it perfect. It's not about doing everything exactly right. It's just really gaining that understanding and that curiosity of, okay, what is it actually like, what is actually happening every month, right? So, and then as you learn more, again, 1% better every day, right? So how can you love yourself 1% better every day? So, thinking things like menstruation. When you are in your menstrual cycle, you are losing blood. Okay. So maybe then thinking about having foods that are higher in iron, zinc, magnesium, B vitamins to replenish what you're losing, right? And
Yes.
then also another priority within that is you're going to want to shed the excess estrogen, right? So also fiber rich foods. So things like cabbage or kale or fill in the blank. Um just and then, once you're done with menstruation, you go into follicular. Now you're in building, right? So there are other foods that you could be then focusing on during that time, and everything can flow within a ketogenic lifestyle. It doesn't have to be something separate. It's just having the information. So I would say definitely if you're a woman, start tracking your cycle if you're not already, and just start to get curious about the various phases of the menstrual cycle and how that can really affect, kind of operate more in sync with it from a food perspective, movement, tons of opportunity there.
So Linda, you're
Um,
gonna need to make us a cheat sheet then of
yeah, for sure.
yeah, of foods that we can maybe focus on at different times of the month based on how these hormone level changes,
Yeah.
um, all throughout the month and how that can help us, "Okay, how can I make myself feel better? How can I really
Yes.
love myself more by focusing on these different types of foods that can help me kinda balance out some of the changes?" So I love that. Yeah, cheat sheet, that's your homework. Okay.
You got it. You
All
got it.
right.
Good, good,
What
good.
does
I
O
like I like
stand
homework.
for?
Always offer, right? So it kind of goes hand in hand with with really listening in, right? So you want to offer yourself time and space to be there for yourself. There's a really great quote by Danielle Laporte, who's someone that I follow religiously. And her it goes, make space for the inevitable arrival of what you want. And I
Okay.
think it's such a beautiful quote because it really kind of you can tag it really at any kind of key area of life, right? So
Mhm.
if you want to have less stress, well then we need to make space for that within our lives, right? So there's a give and a take with anything that we are looking for. So offering ourselves the time and the space to make those changes and to give ourselves what we ultimately need to feel our best is a key step in all this. So I always say that, for me, there's four non-negotiables, right? So we all need to have some set our non-negotiables. So for me, it's nourish, move, play, and rest. From a nourishment standpoint, right? So like from a food standpoint, what are those whole foods, minimally processed choices that we can be making to help fuel ourselves in the best way possible? If you are a Virta member, you have a coach with you every day to help do that, and that's like gold right there. And then even from, outside of food, even your nervous system, right? So we were talking about stress. Your nervous system is a huge piece of that. So how do you nourish your nervous system? Now, again, small deposits, big changes over time. So, like I have a sticky note in my car that says breathe. So every time I get in and out of my car, I do 3 cycles of box breathing. And it may sound silly, and someone out there might be like, "Oh, that doesn't work." I'm telling you, try that for a month and you just start to feel different. It just, again, it's these small little deposits. It's like a high yield savings account. Small little deposits over time, big interest. Yeah, big
Yeah.
interest.
Well, my daughter has a cuddle swing hanging
Love
up in our
that.
living room. Supposed to kinda help, yeah, calm her down when she gets a little overwhelmed. And I crawl into that thing. I crawl into that thing, it's like a cocoon, and I just immediately I'm like, "I'm just so relaxed. Why don't I just do this
Yes,
all
I
the
love that.
time?" That's
I wanna
that's my
swing.
that's how I nourish my
Your nervous
nervous
system?
system. Yeah, but
Yeah.
the breathing, if you don't have a cuddle swing, the breathing is something we can all do. Yes, all of
Well,
us.
I'm for sure searching cuddle swings after we get off the
Yes.
phone. There's no doubt about that. But yeah, and if it's not breathing, it could be something else. It could be a cuddle swing. It could be a massage. Whatever it is, right? But it's your job to put that on your calendar before you start adding all the other things that ultimately we all have to do, right? Like we have the have tos. There's no doubt about it. Stress is inevitable. It's going to happen. But we own our calendars. So putting the time to nourish, from meal planning, time to move. Movement is magic. So again, if it may not have to be a full workout, but what do you have? Do you have 10 minutes in the morning? Do you have 10 minutes in the afternoon? Do you have 10 minutes at night? Micro breaks are a great way to start building up things like movement throughout your day. So maybe it's a 10-minute walk in the morning or a stretch. And there's so many apps that can help you with this. At lunchtime, non-negotiable, you're getting out after lunch and going for a 10-minute walk or just literally just standing in nature. Talk about nervous system benefit.
Right.
There's so much research, even with like hospital patients, where they've done research where patients that have just the view of trees do exponentially better in their recovery than those that don't, which is just amazing. So nature is magic from that standpoint too. So micro breaks when it comes to movement, and then when it comes to play, we always forget as adults we're kind of like kids inside. So let's have some fun, right? So what are those hobbies? What are those things that we can be doing? That can provide us, not only some new experiences, but there's something called hormetic stress. So I think it's important to also kind of make note that that yes, there are negative stressors, and we kind of all are, we kind of all know what those are, right? But hormetic stress is a form of positive stress. So that's when you start to get into movement. So whether it's working out or just movement in general. Also, trying new things or crossword puzzles, those are all ways, kind of stressing our bodies and our brains in a more positive way
Okay.
that actually helps us build resilience and more strength over time. So, it kind of, if you look at it in a way of, what's one negative stress that you could swap with a positive stress, kind of even if you look at it that way, throughout your day.
I
And
like
then,
that, yeah.
yeah,
It's
it,
also
it
nice to
kind
hear
of
that we don't have to do it, like an hour of yoga or, you know, 3 hours of meditation in order to get this benefit. We can do it in these little micro doses as long as we really make sure to, like you said, have it be a non-negotiable for you. You can do a 5-minute non-negotiable a few times a day and really get that benefit is kind of what I'm hearing from you.
absolutely, and that's the key is it's the non-negotiable and the consistency, and that, kind of leads into rest. You want to make sure that you're prioritizing your rest, right? We all need it. Your sleep is when you detox. So getting enough sleep is so, so important. And then, when you're kind of posed with that question or request from someone or something, y- ask yourself, will adding this in be something that, kind of adds to me or depletes me? And, and if the answer is it's going to deplete you, then maybe the answer is no, or maybe it's, you know what, not right now. And you can always come back to things at a time when you have more capacity, right? So being able to kind of know your capacity is important.
Just for kind of the interest of time for our episode today, you
Sure.
had mentioned there's 2 more letters in love. We did
Yeah.
LO. Let's talk about the V. What does that stand for?
Yeah. V is just value your values, right?
Okay.
So what do you value most? What's most important to you in life? Again, going back to those non-negotiables, it all connects together. And if you don't have some core values, maybe it's a good time to just sit down and just kind of write them out, right? Like what do you is your health really valuable to you? Okay. What does that then look like in terms of, the making it a priority throughout your day?
Yeah.
And then express is just, finding things to express yourself. We all need help, whether it is through talking to somebody like a therapist, or whether it is through things like art, or whatever it is, finding these ways to let it out, right? In a healthy way, we all need it, and it's part of loving yourself, and it's part of just being a human. So, I think we sometimes will put stigmas on certain things because we don't wanna be that person who needs, fill in the blank. But, we all need it. It's we're all human, and we're all in this crazy experiment together.
Yes. And we all need love. Uh,
Mhm.
and we all love an acronym. So let's review
Yes.
quickly run us through what the love approach stands for one more time.
Yep. So, listen to your body, listen in. Offer yourself the space and time that you require in order to, nourish, move, play, and rest every single day. Value your values and, never be afraid to express yourself.
So what I want to kind of close with today, Linda, I bet a lot of folks are wondering, okay, this all sounds great. How do we actually what does this actually look like throughout the day? So do you have a story that you might be able to share with us?
Yes, absolutely. Great question. It's actually a member story. So I've been working with a member, and she's rocking and rolling. She's had a lot of great success with Virta. And she's pretty independent. So when she reaches out, I know, like, okay, something's up. She's got something going on. So she recently reached out, it was about a month ago, and she is both of her parents wound up in the hospital, which is terrible. And, before joining Virta, one of this member's kind of goals was was a caretaker her whole life. And she wanted to now have this time to care for herself, to love herself, right? So when her parents both got sick, she, of course, went into caretaker mode. And she started to feel this kind of battle within herself of, "What, I wanna take care of myself." This was my time to take care of myself, and so we just talked it through, and I offered her, a little bit of perspective of we oftentimes will kind of think of things as an or, right? When something comes up, it's my parents' caretaking or it's my caretaking. But what we talked about is how can we make an and, right? What are some things that we can do? And maybe it's a modification, right? So maybe your schedule as it is right now in terms of movement is not what it's going to look like exactly the way it's going to look like, now that you're caretaking for your parents, but how can we make it as close as we can so that you're still getting what you need and you're able to be there for your parents? So she was like, "That's helpful. Thank you." So she went off, and then a couple weeks later we touched base, and, rock star. She had, she bought some snacks that she could take with her to the hospital because another thing that was stressing her out was, hospital food,
Yeah.
which ironically is some of the worst out there.
Yeah.
Like, so, she stocked up on some Virta-friendly snacks, so she had what she needed in case of emergency, and she rejiggered her movement schedules, right? So instead of starting the day with movement, she now is ending the day with more movement, and then when she's at the hospital, she actually goes for walks and gets those steps in the hospital with her dad. So, you know, again, it was just this kind of little shift of in those moments when a stressor comes up, we tend to kind of go into that fight or flight or, freeze, fall, whatever your response is. And we go into like the extremes of it's this or that. And if we can just take a beat to think about, okay, what are the modifications that may need to happen in order for both to continually go so that you're still taking care of your priorities as for you, but you're also, helping out and taking care of your priorities as part of either a family or, whatever it might be.
Yeah. And I think it's so important for us to recognize that, uh, building off of what you said, it doesn't have to look exactly the same as it did or exactly the same as you think it's supposed to be in your mind. But what are some things that we can do, just little bits throughout the day, and they're going to really build up. And I think too, it's gonna keep you moving in that direction versus kind of just stopping and saying,
Yes.
"I'll take care of myself when," or
Mhm.
"Things will be better when," right? Instead, "Okay, what are my non-negotiables? And what are my values? And am I living up to my values? Maybe not, as optimally as I would like, but am I, you know, am I implementing some of those things day to day that are in line with what I believe are, important in my life?" So, I think that's so important for us to remind ourselves of that, and I know that a lot of us really just don't give ourselves the credit for that, and it's we really
Oh,
need to.
amen.
We really need to. So with that, thank you so much for sharing that story. I think it's really important that we recognize there are people that are implementing some of these simple strategies and they're seeing a real impact in their lives, which is absolutely wonderful. Linda, again, we are going to come up with I just volunteered you for this, so thank you. Some stay tuned for a cheat sheet from Linda about how to implement the love technique, how to love yourself, and maybe some different ways that you can do that yourself. I'm happy to partner with you on that, Linda, and that way we can have that resource available so others can really benefit from that. So Linda, if there's maybe one key takeaway that you hope that our listeners would remember from this episode, what would it be?
Yeah, so I would say if not you, then who? This is something that I always kind of come back to, and I think it's an important message. You ultimately, when it comes down to it, well, number one, yes, it takes a village for life to kind of just happen, but ultimately, we kind of are the masters of our own little universe every day. And that includes the first home that we live in, and that is your body and your health and your well being. So if it needs to be your priority, and if you don't make it that priority, then who's going to do it, right? So that's a huge amount of power that you have, and I just encourage everybody to step into that and not be afraid of it, and to just know that you will not get it perfect, and you will be stressed, but you can also do things that can help you manage that stress and deal with it in a really healthy way.
Well, those are some very wise words for us to end on and super empowering too. I hope everybody feels just kind of a breath of fresh air. Maybe feels very validated and ready to go start doing some things that nourish us rather than deplete us. So looking forward to our masterclass on hormones sometime in the future because
Yeah,
oh my
let's do
goodness,
it.
I was just trying to keep up and I just was not. So yeah, look forward to that because I know that plays such a huge role in our health too, and everything that really impacts that. So, um, Linda, thank you for being here. It was really a pleasure, and I look forward to having you back very soon.
Thank you so much, Teresa, and thank you for everyone for listening. And dance. Don't forget to dance
Dance,
also.
yes, yes.
If you enjoyed this episode, be sure to subscribe and leave us a review on Apple or Spotify. And if you'd like to regain control of your metabolic health and feel like yourself again, check us out at Virta.com. That's Virta.com. Your Life Reset is for informational purposes only and shouldn't be considered a substitute for professional medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. Contact your provider if you suspect you have a medical problem. I'll chat with you all again soon. Until then, stay inspired, my friends.